Hi there, welcome to the webinar. This is Merle Goldstein, and today we're going to talk about raising your kids with a toxic partner, the big three: guilt, fear, and denial. So who is this webinar for? Well, this is for you if you tend to be overly responsible and have high standards for yourself and others. If you can't believe you ignored the red flags that you were very aware of and decided to go ahead with a relationship that you knew was going to be a disaster. And if you're a person who people sometimes warn you to stay away from toxic people who you seem to have a blind spot for. This is also for you if you try to look like you have it together, but deep down you feel insecure. If you're afraid of failure, but you don't let on about it. You might even have imposter syndrome. And even though logically you know the person you had kids with is unstable or abusive, you still sometimes question whether you're the one with the problem. This is also for you if you don't really want to talk to anyone about what you're going through because they might misunderstand or blame you for getting into the situation. And also if you know you should probably be standing up for yourself more, but sometimes it feels easier to just avoid conflict. I call this giving in syndrome. This is also for you if you're thinking of getting divorced, but you're scared or unsure. If you're separated or divorced, but you still have to deal with him or her because of the kids. And if you're desperate for some way of making things better that won't involve some really scary or difficult decision you're not ready to make. This is for you if you like to see yourself as someone who isn't afraid to stand up for themselves. You like to see yourself as someone empowered who doesn't give their power away. And you think you know something's wrong with your co-parent, even though they won't admit it or won't go for help, but somehow you still can't stop questioning yourself. So here are a few things we'll cover today. We're going to talk about your guilt and over-responsibility. We'll speak about your fear and efforts to cover it up with logical justifications. And we'll also talk about your denial, which is that you sometimes deny what you know in your gut. And the reason why you need help, even if you don't want to admit it, is that your children are going to see a side of you that makes you feel weak, and you really don't want that. Trying to be logical and reasonable is not really working with this person in your life, with your co-parent who's not so stable or is kind of toxic. And if you're afraid that you made a big mistake, but you also don't want to be pushed to do things you're afraid to do, and you might be trying to justify things that you're doing to avoid your fears or making a decision, right? Then you do need some help with the situation. So does this sound like you? People warn you that someone's trouble, but you only see the good in that person. You feel bad for someone when they present as a victim. You don't like to see someone suffering or being taken advantage of or not having a voice. And when you see someone as a victim, sometimes you do things you wouldn't normally do and let them take advantage of you. Or certainly you might put your needs last if you feel like there's somebody that needs you to protect them or take care of them that's suffering. How about this? Do you sometimes not know if you're being nice or mean when your co-parent accuses you of stuff? You don't always know if you or the other person started the fight or the argument, right? Sometimes the person you're with is twisting things around in a way that really makes you very confused. Like, did I do something wrong? And this may also be you. You love your child more than anything, and you want to make sure they don't pay the price for your poor decisions. You probably see yourself as very conservative and responsible, but you have done a couple of pretty impulsive or reckless things, like getting into a relationship that you knew would be trouble. When people in your life start to question you, you wonder if maybe you're missing something and they're right. So you have a tendency to get a little bit self-doubting when other people make it sound like maybe you've done something wrong or act like there's a problem. And you're very loyal, and you find it hard to walk away from a situation once you're invested in it. So if you're with somebody who's ill or is parenting together with you or that you committed to, you really, really, really value the idea of staying with that person and not walking away. And I've been wondering if you've been feeling helpless because no matter what you do, you can't really win with your co-parent. Maybe you've been feeling responsible because when things go wrong, you automatically think it's your job to fix it. You might be feeling sad because you want there to be a happily ever after ending so badly. And maybe you're even feeling frustrated because you hate not knowing for sure what the right thing is to do. So I have some news for you, and that is that the real problem is that the things you value most and that have gotten you the farthest in life so far are actually a liability in a toxic or unhealthy relationship. I want to say that one more time. The person you are, the character traits you value the most, the type of person you like to see yourself as, the type of people you like to be around, those traits, those character traits are actually probably working against you in the relationship that you're in if you're in a relationship with somebody who is toxic or unhealthy. For example, being growth oriented, constantly questioning yourself, always pushing yourself harder, right? When there's a problem, when you're always trying to do better, do more. You have very high standards for yourself, right? You're probably also someone who's so loyal and responsible that you don't walk away or say no when someone else needs you. It's really important to you to be there for the person. You might be someone who's so logical that you tune out your emotions and your gut. You pride yourself on that. Perhaps you're someone who's always being so responsible that you try to fix a situation as soon as you see a problem. And maybe you're used to being the nice guy and accommodating to the other person all the time. So what we need to talk about today is number one, how to stop projecting what works for you onto your co-parent. Number two, how to be responsible and protective without being unrealistic. And number three, the importance of letting go of denial and being willing to see the negative. And we're also going to talk about why emotions matter, that fear is healthy and appropriate in the right situations, and the difference between fixing and containing. So first, now I want to give you a little bit of background about me, just so you get to know me a little bit. So this is me a number of years ago with my niece and my nephew and my two sons, who are now 18 and 19, but were much younger then. I raised them as a single mom, which I'll mention again later. This is me with my sons at their bar mitzvah. This is them now. Yes, I am a proud mother. And this is me with my son just about a month ago. And to tell you a little bit about myself professionally, so I've been a psychotherapist for the past 18 years. I'm a graduate of Columbia University. I worked in hospitals, jails, schools, residential settings, and private practice. I have given many trainings and lectures, especially about personality issues. I'm a writer. I have a blog. I published a book. I write articles. I also teach college courses. I'm a college professor, and I help families cope with someone who has a personality disorder. And I know what it's like, some of the struggles that you're going through. I raised my children as a single mom. I went through a very challenging divorce when my children were very young, and all of the conflict and torment that goes along with trying to figure out should you stay or leave, and how that will affect your children. I often feel responsible and protective when I see someone suffering, and I'm very considerate of others, and sometimes my kindness gets taken for weakness. But I have learned a few things over the years. I've learned how to look at each situation objectively rather than through my own filter. I've learned how to step outside of a situation or a relationship interaction and not only project onto it, well, how would I feel if I was that person? Or how would I want someone to treat me? But to look at it for what it is. It's a separate, different, objective situation. What makes sense in this case? I've learned how to listen to my gut even when I don't want to face something scary. Sometimes we know something's wrong and we really don't want to think about it because it's going to force us to think about making a decision we don't want to make or having to take action that feels scary. But I learned that it's important to at least pay attention to what my gut is telling me. And I've also learned, which is good news, that kids could turn out healthy even in adverse circumstances if you don't deny their reality. So if you allow children to process what they're going through and you give them healthy tools for managing their emotions and processing their life experiences, they can turn out okay, even if the conditions, the external conditions, are not 100% perfect or optimal. I've also done a lot of things to help my clients, and I've learned how to help my clients set healthy boundaries, avoid being manipulated, de-escalate arguments, and talk to their children about what's going on with the other parents. So now I want to help you a little bit with some of the information I have. So let's dive in. The first thing is, are you in denial? So if in most situations you communicate well, but with this person in your life, things tend to escalate, it might be that you're in a situation, right, with someone toxic or unstable. And we'll just kind of go through the list. If this relationship brings out a side of you that you're not used to, if you often find yourself questioning if you've done something wrong because you're constantly being blamed for things, if you find yourself getting emotionally worked up all the time, even if that's not your default or it doesn't happen in other situations, if you feel confused a lot because the things that you're doing are being misinterpreted, or if you're being disrespected or put down in your relationship, then you're probably dealing with someone toxic or unstable. And the solution I want to offer you today in this presentation is don't ignore your instincts. If your gut is telling you that something's wrong, you should probably pay attention. And if you use regular communication tactics with someone who's not processing or using your communications in the typical way, it could make things worse. And if you try to fix something that can't be fixed, you will be modeling unhealthy behaviors for your child. So if any of this is happening, it's time to admit that you do need help. And here's the catch. Not every situation is the same. So the same behaviors can be assets or liabilities depending on the context. What works for you in most areas of your life might not work well in this relationship. And the way you like to be treated may not be appropriate when you're dealing with someone who has a personality disorder. So the question to ask yourself is this an asset or a liability in my situation? I want you to learn to ask yourself this question when you find yourself doing the things that you're used to doing in relationships and in different settings, right? Being logical, questioning yourself, trying to fix things, for example. I want you to ask yourself this question. Is it an asset or liability in this particular situation? So being growth-oriented and questioning myself, being loyal and responsible, using logic over emotion, and being accommodating or the nice guy. Those are all examples where I want you, if you see that in yourself, I want you to ask yourself, is it the right thing in this situation? And I'm going to walk you through a little bit of how to know or some examples of where these things can either be an asset or a liability. So in terms of being growth oriented and constantly questioning yourself, always pushing yourself harder, right? Trying to be someone who's growing all the time, doesn't let themselves off the hook, has very high standards for themselves. This is an asset when you can fix things, when the problem is under your control, when questioning yourself can help you see something that you need to change or that can make the situation better, and when pushing yourself to master a challenge can help you do that. So if you're in a situation where focusing on what you could do better, what you could improve, how you could fix something, how you could learn something new or push yourself is going to actually make things better or help you master a challenge, it's healthy in that situation to be in that type of a mindset. At the same time, being growth oriented, constantly questioning yourself and always pushing yourself harder is a liability when the problem is not about you, or the problem is not under your control, or you're being manipulated, or it would be healthier to accept a problem than to try to fix it. Sometimes it really is a better use of our energy and our tools and resources to try to just learn to live with something than constantly be trying to fix something if it really isn't able to be fixed or the cost of trying to fix it is too high. Then we come to the idea of being loyal and responsible. So being so loyal and responsible that you don't walk away or say no when someone else needs you, right? Even if it's difficult, right? Your partner is sick, but you're going to stay by their side. You committed to a job, even though it's hard, you're going to see it through till the end, right? Being this kind of person is really an asset in many situations. For example, when standing by someone's side helps them get help or function better, when feeling responsible helps you take constructive action, when your loyalty is appreciated and reciprocated, and when you're standing by your values without being taken advantage of. So if your ability to really stick through even when things get tough and really be someone that others can count on and that comes through is something that is appreciated and that doesn't cause others to avoid taking responsibility or to take advantage of you, that can be a really great character trait. At the same time, being so loyal and responsible that you don't walk away or say no when someone else needs you is a liability when you're enabling someone's unhealthy behavior, right? If the other person knows that you're always going to be by their side or you're always going to be bailing them out or making sure to help them or you're never going to leave no matter what, and that's enabling them to not get help or not take responsibility or not fix a problem that they have, then you might actually be helping them stay stuck or stay sick by helping them avoid consequences or by making the stakes too low for them to need to change. It's also a liability to be so loyal and responsible when it leads to unconstructive guilt or pressure. If you're constantly pressuring yourself and you just have high blood pressure or you're stressed out all the time or you're taking on too much and you feel like you're burning out or it's not really helping anything, it's just a lot of worry and guilt, that's also not a healthy use of the quality of being loyal and responsible. And there are some people, you might not be aware of this, but there are some people who see loyalty as weakness. And the idea that you can't walk away or aren't willing to hold them accountable or to say to them, there's a limit, if this keeps on, I'm not going to stick around. Some people actually don't do well with that. That somehow makes them feel unsafe or makes them avoid taking responsibility or doing healthy things that they need to be doing for themselves. And being loyal and responsible is also a liability if your dependability is letting someone else take advantage of you or avoid responsibility. So if somebody is spending money on drugs all the time, for example, and every single time they run out of money, you come through for them, that is really enabling behavior and you're helping them avoid taking responsibility. And also, if you always focus on being the responsible one yourself, they might get distracted by that and deflect away from looking at what they're not doing right or what they need to improve or change and just focusing on you all the time and letting you change something or become more dependable or more responsible. So it's very important not to overfunction for somebody and take so much responsibility that they're off the hook from healthy responsibility themselves. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about using logic over emotion. So when you make decisions based on logic, it can be an asset in many situations. One is when there's no realistic threat that requires intuition or emotion to pick up on. So there are many decisions we make in life. Should I spend money? Should I buy this car? Should I get up to go to work even though I feel like staying in bed? I feel like doing this, but I think I should do this, or that makes sense even though I'm not in the mood for it. In many cases, if you're able to just not give in to your emotions and make decisions based on logic, this can be really, really helpful. But there are situations where you actually need your intuition or your emotion to pick up information or detect threat that happens much more quickly on a gut level or an intuition level than your logical brain is able to appraise or evaluate a situation. So there might be times where your gut feeling will tell you there's a problem or your emotion will tell you there's a problem much more quickly than your logical mind would be able to figure out. And if you're used to only thinking with logic, you might miss out on that information. It's also a good thing to use logic over emotion if you're able to recognize your emotions, even if you're not using them to make a decision. So it's okay to notice that you feel like staying in bed and not going to work in the morning and then deciding with your logical mind that that doesn't make sense or it's not a good idea or you'll regret it later when you don't get paid and forcing yourself to get out of bed. That can be something healthy, but if you're not aware of what your emotions are, or you're using this logic to tune out or avoid knowing what your desires are or the other side of yourself that wishes you could stay in bed, then it could become defensive. And it's also an asset to use logic over emotion if you're dealing with a concrete objective decision rather than a relationship issue. So when you're making practical choices, should I buy this or that? Should I do this at work or that? Should I be on time to the doctor's appointment or be late? When there's a practical decision to be made, it makes sense to use logic. But in relationships, a lot of times, the way to know the right way to respond to the other person or the right thing to do has much more to do with your emotional read on the situation. And if you're tuning out your emotions or your intuitive side too much because you like to be a very logical and rational kind of person, then you might be losing out on important data about different situations that involve relationship interactions. So I also wanted to say that using logic over emotion is a liability in some situations. For example, that your gut is appraising threat that you're tuning out. Again, it happens much faster than the logical brain's appraisal. So your intuitive side, your emotional side of your brain is able to notice if there's some sort of danger. It might give you a false alarm, but it's still going to pick up on a problem much more quickly than your logical brain can figure that kind of thing out. So you want to be in touch with your gut feeling, with your intuition, and with your emotions. It's also a problem to use logic over emotion if once you start being logical, you lose track of your emotions. I mentioned that before. There are some people that they, as soon as they notice an emotion they're having, they immediately start thinking of it in logical terms or analyzing whether they should feel that way or they shouldn't feel that way. So let's say somebody gets nervous at work because their boss makes some comment about layoffs coming up. The second they notice the anxiety, they start telling themselves, well, you don't really need to be worried because X, Y, or Z, or he also said this, or it's not happening for another 6 months, or you could always get another job. That's fine if you want to calm yourself down with being rational, but if you don't even register that you're actually feeling scared or feeling fear, then you're splitting something off. You're basically making a part of your experience unconscious, and this is going to really affect you in relationships, especially if you're dealing with someone that is processing emotions in a certain way that requires a very high level of attunement for you. And also it can be a liability to use logic over emotion if you're dealing with a situation that requires subjective and intuitive judgment, like in a relationship. So if you hurt your wife's feelings and you can't get why, or you can't read her because it doesn't make sense to you logically, then you're going to have a little bit of a problem in the relationship arena. Now, I also wanted to talk about the quality of being accommodating, or the person who always gives in to other people or would rather, put themselves last, or, it's easier for them to avoid conflict and just do it how the other person wants them to do it and not really speak up for what they want. So being nice and feeling for someone's suffering is an asset when the other person is in the victimized position, right? So if someone really needs us to put ourselves aside and take care of them, or to empower them in some way. Let's say I have money and somebody else doesn't have food to eat. It might be an act of kindness and a healthy quality and a generous thing for me to give them money, or say, you know what, I'm not going to go to watch a show tonight and spend money on that. Instead, I'll give that money to this family who needs it. So that would be healthy in that situation because they have a lack of resources, or they're truly suffering or missing something. And there's something I could do that would be able to help them out in a way that is not so hurtful to me because I have more resources than they have. It's also healthy to be accommodating and to take care of people and protect them when the other person can't help themselves. So if somebody genuinely is disadvantaged, or if there's a bully on the playground who is intimidating or bullying a younger kid or a victim, and you are grown up and you have power to come in and stop it, and this little kid really can't defend themselves because they're too small or they're too young or they're too little. So that would be a healthy situation of coming in and actually trying to help, or being, seeing the person suffering and stepping in, even if you have to put your own needs aside, like you were on your way somewhere important. It might be good at that time to say, you know what, I'll go do that later. This person needs my help. And in that situation, it's healthy to be accommodating. It's also healthy to be accommodating when you realistically can help the other person because you have access to resources or power that they don't have. So I mentioned that before. if you really are in a position where you have something to give the other person and they need that thing, and they're not taking advantage of you, but it's just a healthy act of giving, then that could be a really good quality, to be generous and helpful and to try to help people. And it's also healthy to be accommodating or to be nice or to rescue people, protect them when the other person is taking responsibility to help themselves, or at least trying, right? If somebody is out of work and they're trying so hard to find a job and they don't have one yet, and you want to give them some money in the meantime, but they're trying to help themselves, that's a healthy, appropriate use of helping somebody out. At the same time, being accommodating or feeling for someone suffering or wanting to help someone that you see as a victim could be a liability in some cases. For example, if they're using the victim position to manipulate or guilt you. So let's say a person is lost their job and they don't want to look for new work because it's easier to just get handouts. Or somebody's using drugs and they ask you to bail them out from jail every time, or to give them money that they need to pay their rent. Sometimes they might be manipulating you or guilting you into giving them something because you feel so bad for them, or they seem like they're so desperate, or they're suffering, but really it could just be that you're enabling them or that they're manipulating you. It also could be a problem to be too accommodating or nice or helping of a victim if someone sees themselves as a victim because of an unrealistic expectation. For example, that their adult child will never move out on their own. So there are some parents that their feelings get hurt so easily, or they're very insecure, or their ego is very fragile, and they might make people feel guilty for doing normal, healthy things, right? Like having a friendship, or choosing to get married, or um, getting a job and not being home all day to talk to them or something like that. And in those cases, if you get hooked that just because the other person presents themselves like a victim or like they're suffering, you right away put your own needs aside or give into it, you could be doing something very unhealthy in the relationship and for yourself. It's also a problem if you're turning a blind eye to the ways in which people are victimizing you. So if you're letting yourself be taken advantage of, or if people tell you that you're too naive, or somebody's exploiting you but you're not aware of it, then you want to make sure that you're not using denial to avoid seeing that somebody who presents themselves as a victim or in a one down position isn't actually just using you or exploiting that. And it's also a problem if saying no feels like it's being mean no matter what, right? If you don't have the capacity to ever say no to somebody or to want to do things your way just because you feel so guilty, or it feels so mean anytime you're going to make someone else feel a little bit uncomfortable by standing up for what works for you, that also could be a big problem. So here are some takeaways for you to think about. One is, I want you to ask yourself if you're in a toxic relationship, or if there's a problem you haven't been admitting to yourself. So I want you to deal with the denial piece. Just because you admit that things are bad, or there's a problem, or you were hoping that things were just about to get better, but now you see that they're not, or you think maybe they are about to get better and you don't know what to do, it's good to just admit to yourself what you're dealing with and to be prepared to accept your reality as it is. It's also important to get in touch with your emotions, especially feelings of fear that you might be trying to block out. When we're afraid of something, we feel like we're supposed to do something about it, or that means we need to walk away or get help or say something. And sometimes we're afraid and we just get kind of frozen or paralyzed, or we're not ready to take action yet. But you still want to admit to yourself that you're afraid, because that's a really important piece. I also want to remind you that it's important to recognize that emotions are not always logical, but they still can give us valuable information. So if you've been tuning out your emotions, or you're not that good at getting in touch with your emotions, you want to work on that. And it's also important to realize with yourself and your children that even if you can't give a solution or fix something, you don't need to take people's emotions away. You just need to talk about it. And that's very containing for people. That helps people manage their emotions when they could talk about it and be aware of it, even if it's not necessarily going to change something in reality or on a practical level. And also, I want to encourage you to try to figure out if you're projecting your soft and sensitive side onto others who might be taking advantage of this. You might be somebody that doesn't ask for help if you need it, or wishes that people would have helped you at a time when you were vulnerable, or would have seen beneath the surface that you needed somebody to help you out or protect you. And it's really important to make sure you're not just automatically projecting that onto other people who seem like they're helpless, or they're a victim, or they're fragile. It might be true, but you just want to really look at the situation and make sure you're not just projecting some part of yourself onto them. And also, I want to encourage you to work on accepting what you can't fix or control. Trying to control someone else or get someone to get help when they're not willing, or make someone be different so you don't have to worry about making hard decisions like should you stay or leave. That's just going to be using up energy that is not really going to be constructive. It's much more helpful to accept the situation as it is, to deal with the reality you have as opposed to how you want things to be. I want you to understand there are many ways to help your child or your situation, even if you can't create a fairy tale ending or a perfect picture. So just the idea that you can help your child talk about their reality, process it, realize that it's not them, they didn't cause it, it's not their fault. Of course, I'm not talking about safety issues if your child is unsafe and you need to protect them, but I'm talking about a situation that's uncomfortable or difficult or a little dysfunctional, but not actually to the level of dangerousness, and you can't necessarily make it better, right? I mean, this is the parent your child has, this is their reality, this is the kind of person they're going to have to interact with, but you can help them if you're able to allow them to talk about it. And also, I want to encourage you to learn new ways of communicating that seem appropriate for the specific relationship you're dealing with. So you might need to learn how to say no a little bit more. You might need to learn how to be more firm. You might need to learn how to listen a little more before you rush in to fix things. But you have to work on being more effective and figuring out the person I'm with, how do they actually need me to respond to them in different situations in a way that actually works for them. And I want you to learn that saying no or doing something that someone else doesn't like can sometimes be positive or negative, depending on the context. And there are some people that will test you until you say no. And if you don't actually say no, you're going to increase their anxiety and they're going to keep pushing. And sometimes the biggest favor you can do for them is actually to just kind of be the bad guy and say no. There are some people that find that really helpful. And here are some other things to think about. You might be taking too much responsibility for someone else's problems. So if you're doing that, I want you to notice that and maybe try to stop doing that. Not every challenge can be mastered if you only try hard enough. Sometimes we have to admit defeat or that something's not under our control. It's okay to put yourself first sometimes, and it's for sure good role modeling for your children to show them this, right? And if you're afraid of walking away from an unhealthy relationship, it's better to acknowledge your fears than to blame your decisions on logic, right? Oh, it doesn't make sense to walk away. It's not going to help anyways. That's okay if that's the reason, but if really what's motivating you is you're just scared, it's really better to just acknowledge that and admit that to yourself. And so here are some things I wish for you. 1, I wish that you take care of yourself. 2, that you learn skills like validation, conflict de-escalation, avoiding being manipulated, and healthy boundary setting. And 3, that you realize that you can help your children and your family best when you accept what can't be changed and you stop trying to fix it. So if you need more help, I have a course for you. It's called How to Protect Your Child and Yourself from the Harmful Effects of Living with a Toxic or Emotionally Unstable Family Member. In this course, I will teach you how to understand the inner workings of someone with a personality disorder or abusive personality. And there are actually a few different types of abusive personalities and personality disorders, and it's important to know which one you're dealing with. I will teach you practical tools and techniques for adjusting your communications for the type of person that you're dealing with. I will show you how to avoid being manipulated, how to de-escalate emotional storms or arguments, the art of being effective versus right, and managing the dialectic between acceptance and change, right? How do you accept the things that can't change, but change the things that you can? So if you have any questions, feel free to email me at meryl@goldsteintherapy.com. And I thank you for joining, and that is it for now. Take care.